I don't want to change my view.
So welcome to the Positive Impact Podcast, where we talk about all topics relating to the game that I love. I am your host, Terrell Dozier, and with me I got my special guest today. I have assistant coach from Creighton University, Terrence Rencher. I have the head coach from Georgia State University, Lanier, assistant coach Reynaldo Crossman from Yale, and assistant coach Antoni Wyche from Siena College. What's going on, fellas?
How you doing, T? Thanks, man.
Happy to be here.
We're doing good. So let's jump right into it, man, and let's talk about Terrence, I'm going to start with you first, man. Let's talk about, how you fell in love with the game, and playing, and then making that transition from player to coach.
Right. Well, I'll be honest. I tell people all the time, I don't remember my life without the game. Grew up, my dad played. My dad's from Harlem. He played as a kid. We actually went down to a school called Laurenburg Prep with Charlie Scott, one of his childhood friends. My dad didn't last down there long, city guy. And, that part of North Carolina just didn't appeal to him for whatever reason. Then I had an older brother who played. He played at Talentine around the same era, a little bit before Malik Sealy with a guy named John Johnson and Gary Vosey. So I was around the CHSA a lot as a young kid. And if I wasn't at a game, I was watching on TV with my brother or my father. And, it was just almost like second nature to me. So I didn't have like a all shucks moment. I love this game type of, experience. It was just kind of like part of the fabric of my household. And I just kind of fell in line. In terms of getting into coaching, I played professionally 12 years after college. And I'll be honest with you, I wanted to stay in the game after I played. I just didn't know in what capacity. I had so many teammates for better and worse, and I just couldn't see dealing with the types of dudes I was playing with as a coach. So didn't appeal to me automatically. But what ended up happening was when I got done playing, I went back to Austin because I had to finish my degree to University of Texas. And I just spent a lot of time around the program. I was helping out as an academic mentor. So I was doing a lot of the study hall hours. And, I traveled with the team a little bit in practice, in film sessions, and, exchanging information with those guys and, communicating with the players and the staff. And it just kind of struck a chord with me. And I just felt like that would be the natural progression for me to continue making an impact in the game. And I just buried my head and tried to learn as much as I could, develop as many relationships as possible. And then that's when I decided to go in the coaching direction. I think you're on mute.
Brother.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, Coach Rob. Let's talk about your time.
I'm from Buffalo, New York, and I think my experience was, in the community that I grew up in. I don't know when that moment hit where I fell in love with the game per se, but I do remember a couple of moments that really reinforced, my commitment and passion for the game. When I was in third grade, there was a legendary coach in our community who was a high school coach at South Park High School in Buffalo, named Romeo McKinney. Romeo happened to be the phys ed teacher at my public elementary school. And then he would go to his high school for practice after work. And, when I was in gym class, he sensed that I had some natural skill, ball handling, shooting the ball. And so he would have everybody playing kickball, and he would take me on the side and work with me on my skills. And he was like because he had such a big reputation in the city as a coach, there was a charisma and a confidence about him that he transferred on to me because he was investing time in me while everybody else was playing kickball. And then I was a part of a place called the Maston Boys and Girls Club. And in the city, a lot of the best players and some great Black men ran the building. And so when I got into that environment, as a young kid at 10 years old, I started to get that reinforcement from older guys that I could be good. You know, you get a little nickname and all of that stuff. And so that was, those two experiences were a springboard for me. And I went on to play at St. Bonaventure. And then my sophomore year at St. Bonaventure, we were playing against Syracuse at the Dome with Derek Coleman, Ronnie Cycli, Sherman Douglas. Decent game. I had like 13 points, but I came out of that game realizing I wasn't a pro. I remember vividly thinking to myself that because my coach kept saying, make Sherman Douglas go left, right? And it was much easier said than done, you know. But I remember thinking that those guys out there were different, that there was another level. And so I started thinking about coaching then as a sophomore in college because I knew I loved the game, wanted to be around the game. And by the time I got to my senior year, I had convinced the secretary in the office to let me use the stationery so I could send out cover letters and resumes then. So I got my first job when I was 21 at Niagara University, but I started preparing for that mentally sooner than a lot of guys because the delusion of being a pro, I got over that quicker than most guys, I think.
Right. Nice. So obviously, Tone, I've known you since you was a little kid, man, but give us some background, you know, on your playing career and how you transitioned into coaching.
No problem. You know, was born and raised in Long Island in Bridgehampton, but you know, I moved around a lot as a kid. So my mother was in the military. My father was still working out in Bridgehampton. So for those who don't know, Bridgehampton is a small school. It's like Class D, which is like the smallest classification in New York, but it might damn near be Class E. Like that thing only got about 100. We got about 250 kids, K through 12. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And there's no football, there's no other sports there. So basketball was the way of life there. I moved around a lot though, and I lived out like in Arizona and things like that. And I played baseball, so like baseball was my first love. And it wasn't until I finally moved back to New York in like 5th grade and got back to Bridgehampton, and it was like basketball full time. That's all there was. And it was like, oh man, you tall and you can't clap board, or you can't do this or do that. So it was like that motivation, like you ain't want to be the sorriest dude in the park or whatever. And it kind of just went from there. Like I started investing all my time into basketball. It took off. Moved upstate to Albany in like 8th grade, and really just put my all into basketball. I was like, this is my ticket. This is my ticket to college. You know, I had seen guys like, you know, Troy Bowe go to Hawaii from Bridgehampton, which was a big deal at the time. Bobby Hobson, you know, God bless the dead, just recently passed. I went to Wagner. Those were guys that I had seen right there, and I was like, you know, you could use this to get to college. Man, this is the ticket right here. And fortunately, moved upstate to Albany, you know, played for Ray's father up here at Bishop Gibbons. Fortunate enough to get went to Notre Dame, played 4 years there, played 10 years professionally in Europe. And I'll never forget sitting down in my exit interview with Coach McLeod and Fran McCaffrey. Coach McLeod told me, he's like, yo, you're going to play this game and make some money. And then he was like, you're going to become a coach. And I looked at him dead in his face. I was like, you crazy. Like, I'll never do that. Like, I don't even know why y'all do it. There's no way in the world for a coach. And like I said, I was fortunate enough to play about 10 years overseas, but I think after my 7th year, I tore my ACL and I was out for a year. And during that year that I was out, you know, I had a regular job. I was working, I was rehabbing, but I was spending a lot of time around kids in Southern California, living out in Long Beach. And, you know, got a lot of talent out there, but they had the kids with the problem, you know, not taking the academics seriously or not really knowing what was going on in the recruiting process. So I started, you know, helping mentor kids like that. One of my good friends, AJ Diggs, who was out there, was doing it for a lot of kids from Long Beach Poly. So we was helping a lot of those kids, both football, basketball, you know, just get the academic part right, you know, learn about the recruiting process. And then as I got healthy, I started rehabbing. I started doing those early morning workouts, like breakfast club things, taking a lot of high school kids with me and working out, training, you know, showing what that seriousness was needed to take your game to the next level. And, you know, towards the end of my playing career, I didn't want to raise a family. I got married, had a daughter. I didn't want to raise a family overseas. So I just started, you know, Coach McCaffrey reaching out and just making my way into, you know, what are the necessary steps to get into college coaching, because I think that's the next avenue for me. And I was fortunate enough to got my first position at Lehigh University. I was there 10 years, and just recently made the move this past season to Siena, and it's kind of taken off from there.
Good. Awesome. Ray, talk about your journey.
I mean, basically, I've always been in the gym from a young kid, and to speak to Tone's point about my father coaching him, my father was a high school coach for a long time, and he's always been in the gym, and that's been a passion of the family since the beginning. So I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a coach. I knew that I needed to figure out what exactly it was that I wanted to do. And I felt that I wanted it to be around basketball. I think the first instance that turned me on to really wanting to be a coach was I had graduated from Cobleskill. I played 2 years there, obviously not high-level basketball, but basketball nonetheless. And I took a year off to try to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. I knew I needed to go back to school, but in the meantime, there was tournaments in Albany, and I put a team in. And from being in the Northeast, upstate, I was able to build some really good relationships. So when I put the team together, I had Taylor Battle, Jimmer Fredette, Edwin Ublis, Alex Zampier. And it was just because of relationships and playing basketball and just being around in the mix all the time. So the team was really good, and people started calling me coach. So it made me want to develop more and try to find my avenue and my opportunity to get to being, the goal was to be a college basketball coach. And I didn't even know what that meant, really, because if you're not in the game and you haven't taken steps as a GA or a manager or an ops or just being around programs, you don't really know what it takes. So I wanted to be a college basketball coach. So I went to UNC Charlotte to get my undergrad. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door as far as understanding what it took. So I've gone from being a manager and probably didn't do a really good job as a manager because, again, I didn't know what it took. I was probably a little naive to understanding what the workload and the grind and just everything that goes into it. But nonetheless, had the opportunity to do that, and then went to coach at prep school, then got the job when I graduated at Skidmore, and now at Yale. But to answer the question, it's always been a passion, and the more that you're in it, the more you're learning about it from my personal point of view and understanding what it takes. And I think the biggest thing is probably relationships and being around kids, because I know all of us don't ever really feel like we're going to work. We're kind of just working, and we're doing what we're doing, and we're in our passion. And I think being able to show kids the right way and motivate and help them understand what it takes to be a respected man, a successful man, and help them reach goals that they probably never thought that they could reach. So I think that's probably the most important thing to me, is just having the ability to be in the gym and being around kids all the time and helping them develop, because at the same time, they're helping me develop.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Rob, tell me about your philosophy as far as the type of kid that you're looking to recruit to Georgia State. Is there a certain type of kid, or does it depend on what you're looking for from year to year?
Can't hear you, Coach.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I think across the board, we're all looking for kids that are at a certain talent level, of course. And I think we all talk about wanting guys that are competitors, right? So if you just take those aspects and put them aside and say, all right, you're going to get a talented player who's really competitive and can be productive in the things that you need to do to win basketball games, what are you looking for in those guys? And what I want primarily, and the number one thing we talk about as a staff, is that we want guys who are grounded in humility. All of us have you know, I've gotten to know Terrence over the years. I've been around his family. And so, again, saying in general, the time that we spend doing this, we spend away from our families, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got 2 daughters. I got 2 kids. And so the time we spend away from our families, we're going to be with these dudes, right? Our staff and the other people. So I want to like them. I want to be around people that I enjoy being around in the absence of my family.
Right.
So that number one quality that I want is a humble guy, because I think humble kids, they learn better. They've got more potential to grow and improve because they're starting from a vantage point of not having all the answers. And so I like those kind of kids. You know, I think humble kids are hungry, and guys who think they got all the answers, you're always fighting with those guys. Now, what I say to my staff is, there's going to be kids that really love the game, who are humble, who work hard and have all of those qualities we're looking for from a basketball standpoint, but don't love school.
Right.
I'm okay with some of them guys because there's a carrot there that we have because we got something in common. You know, me and that kid share a love and a passion for basketball. So I can find there's a mechanism there that you can communicate with that kid. Then there's kids who they do have an orientation towards their future outside of basketball, and they're conscientious academically, et cetera. And they may not necessarily have the same passion that you want every kid to have basketball-wise. But I'm okay with that kid because he can still be a positive image and contributor to your program.
Absolutely.
And then there's kids who got both. I want those guys. And then there's kids who have neither. And I don't want to be around them.
Right.
I don't want to walk in the gym and be around a kid who don't love basketball or school. Okay. And so from a recruiting standpoint, we certainly we only get 13 scholarships. I don't want anybody who has that makeup to occupy any of those 13 scholarships. Gotcha. Because I don't think you can win. I don't think you can improve. I think that's a bad formula. And then obviously, you know, by position, there's certain things that you're looking for in your point guard or your off guard or your post people, et cetera. So I won't bore you with all of that stuff. But in general, the number one thing is I want guys that are humble, because like you mentioned, that there's some great men here, right here, who got some information to share, yes. Right? But it ain't going to be received if they don't have a humble spirit, you know, if they don't have it in them to receive that information. So that's really something that we talk about a lot around here.
Right. So, Terrence, you're coming to my house to recruit my son to Creighton University. What is it that you want me and my son to know on why Creighton is the best university for my son?
I mean, obviously, if we're to that point where we're in your house, you know, we've made some headway, I would imagine. So, I mean, you know, you have all the typical things, right? Why you believe it's a good fit from a style of play perspective. Obviously, you have to I think it's a shared vision, you know, what we can do for you, what you can do for our program, cover those bases. But I think at the end of the day, what all this boils down to is how you come across to them as people. You know, because at some point, you know, when you're recruiting against whoever you're recruiting against, like we all have the resources in the Big East, right? We all have the resources. We all have, you know, the bells and whistles and all that other stuff that comes with coaching at that level. So I think you really have to connect with people at a different level than the opposing schools. That's been my consistent experience. I mean, sometimes the conversation's a little bit different, but at the core of all of this, it's got to be some type of connection to where those parents or those guardians or whoever's involved in that situation trust that you're gonna not only continue, you know, the kid on the path that they've been on at home, but also how can you improve that? How can you, give that extra oomph to get the kid developed to that next phase of his life and out the door and prepared for the world, and have the right perspective on how to be successful. So, I think through all the because we can all make the basketball talk sound good. I mean, I just think the main separator is how you connect with people on a human level. And I think, not to get off course, but I think that's the one thing I'm struggling with a little bit right now with the way we have to recruit. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things I enjoy the most about the recruiting process is when you get a family on campus and you can have a side conversation with the dad. Yes. While the kid is with the strength coach, or you can pull the kid and talk to him during dinner while everybody else is into another conversation. Like those moments of connectivity, I think those are the game changers when it comes to getting a kid leaning towards your program, or to another program, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So Ray, like you're at Yale, Ivy League school. Talk about, do you feel like there's a difference between the student athlete that you get as opposed to at other schools? So everybody's there to play basketball, but you kind of feel like, oh, these kids are at Yale, like they got bigger, basketball is just kind of like the tool for them. So talk about like the Ivy League student athlete as opposed to maybe a Big East player or somewhere else that's not as high academia as a Yale University.
Yeah, so to correct you though, and I wish what you said was true, that I was an assistant coach, but I'm the director of ops. So I'm not necessarily recruiting. Right. But obviously I'm in the mix enough to know to answer your question. I think that as far as the kids that we recruit, you have to recruit a certain kid. Mm-hmm. You have to recruit a kid who, in most cases, you want to recruit a kid who can really hoop, who happens to be able to do the schoolwork, who's talented enough to score well enough on the SAT, ACT, and carry a GPA with a certain number of AP courses. I think back in the day, in the Ivy League, you would have student athletes who were able to play basketball, or they played basketball, so they were on a team. And I think now, for us to compete at a certain level and be able to go to Clemson and Penn State and Carolina or whatever the high major school, or even in our league, a Penn or a Harvard, and really compete and try to win games, you have to have a number of kids who are basketball players, who have been developing to be basketball players, but also are able to do the schoolwork. And then obviously the financial aspect is a little different, because everybody else on this panel, when they want a kid and they feel the kid fits their program, it can help them win games, they offer them scholarship. And now we do offer scholarship, but it's not a full pay, no-brainer. If it fits, it fits, because they don't have to worry about money. So the financial aspect also plays an extremely big role. I think for our program right now, we're able to recruit the kid that we want and we need, but it's just not an easy task because of the kids who we really want. A lot of them want to go play high major basketball.
Right.
And they have to decide, am I going to go high major or to a bigger school, and maybe not necessarily have the role that I could play if I went to a high academic school like Yale. But I think the difference maker when we're recruiting is we're preaching to the kids, and it's documented that this is a 40-year plan, not just the 4-year plan. So when our kids graduate and they've been able to build a certain network, especially if they do a really good job and not just help win games, but carry themselves the right way and represent the program correctly. When they graduate, there's so many alumni, especially men's basketball alumni, that are going to pull them up. So you can have a great Yale degree, a Yale career. You have an opportunity to be a pro, because more so now than ever, you can be a pro from anywhere. You could be a pro from Division III, and that's documented also. But when basketball is over, that degree means so much. So that's the leverage we use. And I think Coach Jones has done an amazing job of building the program up to the point where he can really recruit the exact student, athlete, and family that he needs to continue to carry the torch for the program.
Absolutely. So, you know, Tone, with your playing background, you know, playing at a Notre Dame and then playing overseas, what is it that you say to a kid who might come into your program and feel like he should be getting more touches or he should be starting or whatever? Like, does that playing attitude that you had as a former college player and former pro come into play and say, hey, listen, I got experience in playing, everybody has to wait their turn? Like, how do you handle that? How do you bring your playing experience into your coaching experience?
I think that comes more so like just being on the floor with them and workout and developmental stuff like that. You know, being able to get in some drills. Well, used to be able to get in some drills and demonstrate some things. But it's stuff that I'm telling you. You know, I can show you some, demonstrate some. You know, there's proof in the things that I'm telling you to work on or whatever. But when it comes to like real sitting down and playing time and things like that, I just really go back to like, are you putting the work in? You know, let's sit here and talk realistically. I'm very, I don't try to fluff things and BS kids. You know, I try to keep it real with them. And if it's like, I can see it from both sides of the spectrum. I'm in the gym working with you. If you're not putting that extra work, you can't expect, these different results if you're not putting the extra work in. And then, I'm also, on the coaching staff. So if you're not giving me enough to trust you with, if you can't remember plays, execute, because it's not always about just putting in work, you got to be able to follow what the team is trying to do and what the coach wants you to do. So sometimes it's just, kids could be in the gym all day working, but they're working on the wrong stuff or they're not applying what coach really wants done. So it's, I think our jobs as assistants is just try to bridge that gap to help them understand, because coach can say it one way and this kid might not understand it that way. So I got to try to bridge that gap to get them on the same page.
Absolutely.
And, I've been there as a player. I had my struggles my first year at Notre Dame. Had to go through the maturation process and all that thing. Sometimes it wasn't even that they was telling me something wrong. I just wasn't listening,
Right.
And when you see kids in that way, it's helping them get out their own way sometimes.
Absolutely. So, I'm an old school guy, man. I graduated in 91 and, obviously there was no social media back then or nothing like that. One of the things that bothers me the most is, every time I turn on my social media, some kid is blessed to receive an offer. You know what I'm saying? I understand that that's part of the times. When I played, I didn't know where the guy across from me was going to school or who was recruiting him. I just know he was good. You know what I mean? I didn't really care. It was really about me and who was coming to talk to me. So and I feel like a lot of the recruits and a lot of the kids are entitled now, with the sneaker circuits and stuff like that now. So talk to me, Terrence, I'm going to start with you on this. Talk to me about, do you feel like the recruit has changed, obviously from when you played and to now, and how do you guys kind of deal with that? Because now, like, it's not just talking to kids and parents. I got to talk to the handler. I got to talk to the uncle. I got to talk to the AAU coach now. So talk about recruiting now as opposed when you went through it.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's always refreshing when you can catch a situation where it's mom, dad, and coach. I love those, because they're rare now, right? I mean, like you said, man, you got the trainer, uncle. I've had to talk to girlfriends sometimes, right. You know what I mean, to that degree. So it can get ridiculous. But also, things evolve and advance, man, and we have to understand that. I'm following some kids on TikTok. I mean, I have nothing to do on TikTok, but it's a couple kids I'm recruiting, and I got to indulge. You got to change your stripes a little bit. And to be honest, that's one of the parts of the job that is kind of enjoyable, kind of keeps us young, right? We have to adapt as older guys to what these younger kids are doing, which keeps a element of youthfulness for us, which is not all bad. But I would just say, man, you just have to adapt with the times, else you're going to get left behind. I don't enjoy all the aspects about the way we recruit or, the whole blessed to receive my 17th offer. I can't stand those. Some of the things that really, really bother me. But like I said, it's part of it. it's a game within a game that we have to play. And I think the more you can educate yourself about the social media in terms of, how to get content to kids or how to get kids' attention, then the better off you'll be in terms of continuing to develop as a recruiter. Because it's like anything else, right? I think, we always talk to our players about getting better, improving, being dedicated, all these types of things. And, it's the same thing for us. We have to carry that in our daily work. We have to improve. Like you said, it's a little bit different now as opposed to when I was playing. And, Coach Lanier is the most experienced guy in this group. I'm sure he's seen many stages, many phases of how recruiting has gone. And here he is. And I'm sure he's adapted and adjusted and doing whatever he has to do to keep his program afloat and continue to push that thing forward. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think it's as simple as adapting to the times, staying relevant, understanding the times we live in and how you can be effective in pushing your school, your product, and figuring out in that way. But I do hate the parade of offers.
Yeah.
I hate being thrown on a list with 15 other schools. Very irritating. But like I said, it's part of the game. It's the cost of, it's the price you pay to be involved now. So it is what it is.
Absolutely. So Rob, Terrence said it for me, but you're the OG in this group. You know what I mean? And, you've been around the longest. You've been at some major high level schools. Talk to me about how recruiting has changed from when you started until now. And like you said, like, how have you had to adapt to it?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Terrence is saying there. Just my disposition in general is like, I'm not one of those old cats who's always talking about how kids have changed.
Okay.
I think at their core, I think kids are the same, but the world around them has changed. So they're a product of the world around them, a world that they didn't create.
Right.
The kids themselves didn't create social media.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So, so we do have to adapt and find different ways to communicate with them because, let's face it, I mean, when I was coming up, I would rush to the newspaper to see my name in the box score. You know what I mean? The next day, you had to wait till the next day. And if it just said your name, it was a big thing.
Right.
So if I could have had a mixtape, I would have been all about that too. You know what I'm saying? So I don't begrudge young people for having been exposed to a world that they didn't create.
Right. Okay.
So my disposition when dealing with them, I'm not judging them, even though I don't want to hear the music that they playing, because I want to hear some lyrics or whatever, like, you know what I mean? But I got an 18-year-old son, and so I I'm patient when it comes to that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know for myself, for me as a young kid, I mentioned that Maston Boys Club that I grew up in, it was all about going D1.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That was a theme. How many times you hear that? I'm trying to get to D1.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, well, these kids today, they getting D1 offers.
Right.
And they proud of it.
Right.
I ain't mad at them for that. Mm-hmm. What I do have a problem with sometimes is the schools that overindulge in the offering process, right? Mm-hmm. So, because to me, and my assistants here had trouble with me because I'm so slow offering people, because I'm not putting out frivolous offers. I'm not putting out gestures. Mm-hmm. If I offer you, that means I want you. And if you commit, it's done on the spot. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, let's just keep moving forward until we reach that point. Okay. But, so I have more of a problem with that. And some of the people that try to use the fake offers as leverage to try to get people to indulge in it. But we try to hold firm on that stuff. We're going to be really selective about who we offer and why. Because I think that the reason why things don't work out is the manner in which so many people communicate with prospects. That if I've been at a high level where if a kid thinks he's one and done, and we don't, but we still pursue that on that basis to get him, and then he gets there and he's not one and done, and it goes left, then we're culpable in that scenario. right?
Yes.
And so if our expectations and their expectations line up, then that's a pretty good situation that has a chance to be successful. And I think whatever the situation, whether a kid thinks he's one and done or whatever, if the communication is such that you're aligned with the prospect, that what you have to offer and your vision for that kid is in sync with what they're looking for, then generally those situations work out. You know, you could imagine, like I listened to Terrence talk, and Terrence and I known each other, you know, I'm certain that a big part of his recruiting approach is honesty. Right. And transparency. Mm-hmm. And that's the way we try to do it as a staff. And so as a result, there's some kids that you're just not going to get.
Right.
And if you got pretty good reception, your antenna's going to go up and you're going to know which situations don't fit you and you're going to move on, you know. And I think that's where the disconnect lies is a lot of situations don't go well because people ignore bad communication to get talent sometimes. And those situations often don't go well.
Absolutely. So, Tone, you know, I went to a prep school and did a postgraduate. I went to St. Thomas More in '92 and played for Jerry Quinn there. And the best thing that ever happened to me was the mandatory 3-hour study halls that we had at St. Thomas More. So I was always a smart kid, but the 3-hour study halls and, you know, being mandatory means that I had to get my work done. I didn't have a choice. But then when I went to college the next year, it was like I never went to St. Thomas More. All that stuff went out the door. So talk about how you guys at Siena help the student athletes with their time management, which I think is huge with all the travel that you guys do and practice and weights and individuals. How do you help your student athletes with the time management piece and balancing the books and the basketball?
I think that's, you know, probably the same across everyone's here. They're different schools. You know, all of us have academic advisors who kind of go over a time management plan with kids. It's really beneficial to do it, you know, when you get them in summer school or get them there right before their freshman year to just try to map out things. Because, you know, every kid, some kids were great, you know, students at high school and think they could just coast by in college. And then it takes about, you know, first few weeks in before they get smacked upside the head and be like, oh, you know, this is tougher than I thought. Some kids have never just really had great study habits. You know, everybody has something that they struggle with once they get to college. But we build out, you know, a time management plan. We map out the classes.
Yeah, I guess we lost, and that was abrupt. So, Ray, why don't you take over that question for me, you know, as far as time management is concerned?
Obviously, in the Ivy League, academics is basically, in a lot of cases, more important than everything that's going on. I think that in most cases, we have a number of kids, and we've recruited kids who are able to do the schoolwork, mm-hmm. and we really just expect kids to be who they are in the classroom. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some kids who it comes easy, 4.0s, 3.8, 3.7. There's going to be some kids who are 3.0s. There's going to be some kids who are 2.5, 2.6. And you want to talk to those kids because we want to try to get those grades up. But we expect them to do the work that they're capable of doing. And in most programs, especially, again, academic programs, coaches know the threshold of time the kids need to get their schoolwork done. So to speak specifically from Yale standpoint, we're in the gym, we get out the gym, and you got plenty of time to do your schoolwork. Obviously, like Tone said, there's academic advisors, there's people, students who are willing to help, and there's a number of outlets for the kids that if they're having trouble or they need help to get their schoolwork done. But again, I think that where we are, it's a given to get your schoolwork done. That's a part of what we're doing. So I think it probably differs from program to program, depending on what school you're at, because some of those kids, like Coach Lanier said, they don't want to do academics. They just want to hoop. They just want to go in the gym. They want to play, and ball is life, right? And I think that at Yale, I think ball is life for a lot of our kids, but at the same time, they have standard as individuals, standard as families, that there's just a broader goal things that we're trying to accomplish, and you can't accomplish it unless you do what you're supposed to do in the classroom at a high level.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. So I'm going to hit you guys with one last question before I let you go. Terrence, I'm going to start with you. Ray, then I'm going to go to you. And then Rob, as the OG in the group, I have a specific question that I want you to touch on. So Terrence, hypothetically speaking, I'm a guy who wants to get into the game. I want to coach. You know what I mean? And it's, I'm sure a lot of guys say they want to coach. What advice would you have for me if I come to you and say I'm trying to get into the coaching game?
I mean, the first thing I tell you is, erase whatever perception you have of what coaching is in your mind as you embark on that journey. Because I think a big part of why a lot of guys want to get in, I don't want to, overgeneralize, but a big part of the reason why a lot of guys want to get into it is because when they see our games, mm-hmm. and they see, oh man, I saw my guy, he was on the bench last night, he had a suit on, and it was on ESPN, and it was live. I think that's the first thing that guys kind of, mm-hmm. especially a lot of the younger guys, kind of gravitate towards that optic. So I would say erase any perception that you have of what you think the business is about. Secondly, don't count any money. Don't try to think about money in terms of getting in this business. Don't base what you're trying to do off a dollar amount. That's not what this thing's about. Obviously, it's business, so obviously, you want to put yourself in position as you move forward. But initially, you can't think money, and then you have to know as many people as you can possibly know. Because I'll be honest with you, I think I have a pretty decent resume physically, but I've never had to use my resume to get a job. I mean, you had to use it for the HR process, but in terms of getting a job, a resume hasn't really served me at all in this deal. So right. The relationships, that's paramount, obviously. And that's across the board in this business. And then, man, you just got to be willing to do anything. Like, you got to be willing to live wherever. You have to be willing to take any responsibility, any duty associated with the program. And you have to truly humble yourself. I know a couple guys who I think potentially could have been good in this business, but they just didn't have the humility to continue grinding. And then the last thing I'll say too is, because I had to humble myself in this regard. And you kind of have to, because that's just the way it is. You want to plot a path, and you want to visualize kind of where you see yourself in 2 years, 4 years. But that never works either. I mean, I think you really have to, obviously with an eye on your future, with goals in mind, but also you just have to do the job that you have, and do it at the highest levels you can possibly do it. This game is totally unpredictable. I've been in situations where, I was looking forward to the next season. We coming off a good season. We got a good core coming back, and we're fired. Right. You know what I mean? And I've been in situations where probably think we might get fired in 2 more years. So it's just so unpredictable. It's so fluid. You have to be extremely flexible. And then I think at the end of the day, I think just like being good in any team environment, it's just an element of sacrifice. As a assistant coach or a staff member, you have to sacrifice, because I think, for Tone, for example, I bet Tone looks at Carm some days and like, man, why we do? I bet we should do it this way. I got a better idea, right? Tone, am I right? But you have to sacrifice, right? You have to sacrifice what you think is right, or the way you would like things to go for the greater good of the organization, of the program. So those are some of the key points that I always touch on when guys ask me that. So it's a beautiful business from the outside looking in, especially when you see us on TV in those big games. But that's such a small part of what we do. That would be the last thing I tell guys. You see the games, but actual basketball is maybe 15% of the job. I mean, actual game days, those 30, 32 days a year. So those would be the elements I would touch on when young guys ask me those questions.
Absolutely, because y'all cats be looking good on game day too. Them suits be official. They be creased and everything when y'all be on them on the sideline.
Then you might have to rush out the arena to the airport after that game to go recruit that next day. They forget about that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So Tone, tell me about, I played ball in college. Can I get into coaching without a degree? Is that possible, or is there some type of there are some guidelines into getting in coaching besides my knowledge?
Yeah, it's very tough. Damn near impossible to get in without a degree. It's hard to be in an institution of higher learning if you don't have a degree and try to have kids get it.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys have to finish up stuff, so maybe you might be able to get in like a GA position or something like that, but you got to be working towards that degree. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to just jump right on a bench and get an assistant coaching position without a degree, which is unfortunate because a lot of kids are short-sighted in the, I'm going to play ball, exhaust my eligibility, I'm going to go hoop overseas, and now I'm just going to get into coaching, and they don't know everything else that's required of it, right. Which is why we have a lot of guys that got to go back to school after things are done, I think, Terrence, you could acknowledge, playing overseas, like you got a lot of time. If you got to finish up, you can take classes online or whatever. Every kid's situation is different, but I'm like, the longer you wait afterwards, the harder it is sometimes.
Absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. So Ray, what kind of advice would you give me if I came up to you? And obviously, like you're in the ops position, which I think is where a lot of guys kind of start, GA and ops position, and you're looking to get on the bench. So, going through what, in the position that you're at right now, like what would you tell me?
I think there's a lot of things that we could talk about as far as getting in the game. I think the most important thing that I've learned is that you got to be in it and you got to be available, and you always have to be around. So I think a lot of guys, they say they want to coach and they say they want to get their foot in the door, but they don't understand the time and dedication that it takes. So just as far as being in the office first, being to the gym first, being in the office last, being into the gym last, taking phone calls at 1 a.m. when your head coach is calling you about something, just being available and in it at all times. You don't want your head coach, or you don't want somebody who you think should hire you to feel that you're not always available. Because head coaches are always in it. They're always in it. They're always thinking about it, and they want you to be the same way, because they wouldn't have gotten to the point that they've gotten to if they weren't always in it. So that the one thing that I would say is you just have to give as much time as you can. You can probably give more time than you're giving, especially as a young cat, and be available all the time, 24/7, because it don't stop, right. Especially if you want to be a part of a program that wins games, that has high standards, and that carries themselves a certain way. So you don't want to be the person who's lacking in that sense. Like, you just always be in it, always be available, always be willing. There was times when I was young where a coach might have asked me to do something, and I'm like, coach, I don't do it. Just do it, because they're asking you for a reason. And it's because they want to see if you're willing, and they want to see if you have the same passion as they have. So I'll always be in it, always be available, always be ready.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Terrell. My bad.
Yes.
I know you want to go to Rob real quick, but I wanted to ask Rob something just based off that last statement. He said head coaches are always on, right? And obviously, just there's so much to cover. You got a lot of people in your program, and just a lot of tentacles that you have to be attached to at all times as a head coach. Coach, how do you recognize, I guess, or how do you step back sometime to keep your clarity, right? Because I guess sometimes when you're in it, you're not. Sometimes your vision can get blurred. So how, if it makes any sense, how do you check yourself and step back, say, hold on, let me get in mode to maybe reevaluate some things or get a clearer picture of my program in certain instances? I'm just curious to know, how do you keep that balance where you obviously you're all about your program, but at times you have to take a step back to see a bigger picture to gain some clarity about where you are at a specific time?
Yeah, I think you that's a choice word that you used, clarity, because I think it, I think everybody thinks they're ready to take that step when you're an assistant. But there is a moment of clarity that you get when you really feel prepared, and I talk all the time about, when I was a younger coach, my reputation as a head coaching candidate, right? And I could talk for a while about this, but we all, when we're coming up in the profession and listening to you three guys, it'll give you a little bit of a snapshot. Like, it's a lot of good dudes out there that are good at this, that are sharp. Like, listening, I'm inspired listening to how articulate you three guys are, right? When I was a young coach, my reputation as a candidate was really moving at a faster rate than my development as a coach, right? But in my mind, you couldn't have told me I wasn't ready. I had interviewed, by the time I got the Siena job, I had already interviewed. That was my fourth head coaching interview. My first interview, I was 27. Like, did I know what I was doing at 27 to run a program? But I had a reputation that lended itself to those kinds of opportunities. And as a result, so now you fast forward to when I'm coming to Georgia State, and people would ask me, well, what's the difference? What have you learned? And I don't know if it's any one thing. I think, 14 years, you just learn, you grow as a man, as a husband, as a father, all of those things. But I did develop a sense of clarity that I have a better, more convicted understanding of what I want in a player, what I want as a coach. I mean, one of the first people I offered a job to was Terrence Rencher. He turned me down, by the way. We'll talk about that later.
Answering this question anyway, man.
Yeah, but when you listen to him speak, you could tell why I would see him as the kind of dude I would want to surround myself with, right? And so that clarity lends you to, it gives you a better platform to make the decisions that go into building a program. And so all the nuances that go into building a program, along with building a staff and building a team and a team of people around the program, whether it's your academic coordinator, strength coach, whatever it may be, that in those circumstances that you're asking about, all of that goes together, because the communication from within your staff, everything contributes to your ability to make decisions, right? And the less, again, that word, the less clarity you have, the more clouded your judgment does get. And when you get into situations that might be outside the box, maybe it's a disciplinary situation or any number of situations that take place, because you do have to be prepared that things are going to happen that you don't plan on, right? A lot of that comes down to your instincts as a man, as a coach, and just your overall experience level from being in the I got a website, and Terrence did a story for me about an experience that he went through. And that experience is something that he's going to have as a resource at some point when he's a head coach. He's going to have a decision to make, whether it's relative to somebody on his staff or somebody on his team. He's going to draw from that experience, and he's going to have the clarity to walk through that situation accordingly, right? And I think a lot of it just comes down to instincts, whether even in the middle of a game, things happen. And you don't know why Greg called that timeout, but his experience drew him to, he saw something or felt something through his experiences that said, okay, we need to make a move here based on my gut. And a lot of things just come down to that feel and who you have around you. I don't know if that answers your question, T.
That's good. That's a good answer, Coach. Appreciate it.
Sure.
So my question to you, Rob, is, when obviously my basketball experience, goes back to me growing up, but I remember John Thompson, Nolan Richardson, John Chaney, Larry Finch's, like so many Black prominent head coaches in the game of basketball. You know what I mean? That was huge for me growing up to be able to see that. And I remember the Black Coaches Association, and I remember the John Thompson walking out because of, Proposition 48 and Prop 42, like guys like really taking a stand and being giants in this game. So, I see a ton of African-American assistant coaches and I'm sure all of y'all want to be head coaches, and Rob, you've gotten there, but it kind of like talk to me and give me your views about why don't you see any more African-Americans at the big time schools, besides the fact that, people aren't leaving the job, but, how come more African-American coaches aren't up for the jobs that are opening up?
Well, again, those names that you mentioned are the guys that influenced me as a young coach. Because even back then, other than Bill Cosby, you didn't see a lot of black people on TV, period. So when you saw those guys, they did become giants, right? And the landscape of college basketball has changed dramatically since then. If y'all haven't seen this, you should watch Requiem for the Big East. It's a great history lesson for guys that love, the game.
Yes.
And those guys didn't make a lot of money. It was their involvement in the game was about passion and a passion for young people. And by virtue of what those guys were a part of, the landscape of the game changed as it became a bigger business, right? So guys are making millions of dollars now. The game generates billions of dollars. So, when I talk to young coaches all the time, I want them to understand, because I think, I forget who made it, but I think you or Terrence made this point earlier, because so many people want to be in our profession and they see it through the lens of Division I basketball. And a lot of times their aspirations really lie in Division I. And so just from that vantage point, there's 353 Division I jobs in the world. That's it. You think of any other profession, my wife's a physician, lawyers. I mean, really, half the kids, all the kids that go to Yale, they're aspiring to something big. Well, what if you told those people the profession you choose, there's only going to be 353 of those in the world, right? And then if you break that down into geographical, we talked about relationships and all of that stuff. So geographically, when Terrence gets his first job, is it going to be in the Pacific Northwest? Is it going to be in the Pac-10 or one of the Power 5 conferences? So you start playing that game, and it's going to get down to where, Tony Wyche, there might be 10 jobs in the country where he could get an interview, right? So never mind whether they're black or not, there's a small pool of opportunity. Even if all 353 jobs were held by black people, it would still be a small pool of opportunity, right? So listen, when I get a job, I want to hire Terrence, Rencher, or whoever. That's my prerogative once I've been put into that position. And so it's the same thing for every AD or president that's making the decision. It's their prerogative how they want to fill the job. As long as their objective is to win, because they got a bottom line to meet for that institution. And most of us, when we go into those situations, we're part of a hierarchy. And because we think of Division I through a glamorous lens, sometimes we mistake where we're at on that hierarchy. You're not at the top of the food chain. And that's why it's easy for people to get fired, because they're going to move on to the next guy. So I don't have an explanation for why more brothers not getting the jobs, but more brothers certainly are in positions than were during the time when John Chaney and those guys were doing their thing.
I agree.
So my thing is, we can't control that part of it, but each of us can control the reputation that we put out, the energy that we put out into the world. And you can't necessarily control what people say about you when you're not around, but you really can, by the way you go about your business. And the best possible thing you can do is that when that small pool of opportunity does present itself, that your reputation prevails, that you've done enough, you treated people the right way, you've worked hard enough. Earlier, Terrence said you're willing to do everything. You're willing to move anywhere. How do you treat people? And one of the things that I learned is that you have to, and Leonard Hamilton was the first one to pull me on this, try to learn how to do everything. Because at some point, if you're going to be a head coach, you're going to have to delegate everything. And if you've done it all, then you know how you want things done. Going back to that thing about clarity. So I think if guys really just try to do the best they can to build a reputation so that you may do everything right and not get a job in this profession because there are only so many jobs out there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people want to look at it as an injustice, but sometimes it's not an injustice. It's just the numbers ain't working out for you. But when that opportunity presents itself, you need to be prepared because it might not come back around. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question there, but that's my outlook on that. And now, do you have enough security, like a Rick Barnes or a Tom Izzo, to have the effect, the wide-ranging effect of a Nolan Richardson? That's a different element because it ain't, I was just telling somebody this the other day because I follow Ron Hunter, who did an unbelievable job here, right?
Yes.
Well, I've never known Ron. I mean, I know the brother, he a good dude, but I've never known him as anything other than a head coach. He might be the second most tenured brother in college basketball, behind Leonard Hamilton. Think about that.
Right.
How many guys actually have that sort of stability that they can have the voice that those guys had back then?
Right.
You know, a couple years ago, Shaka tried to tweet something about Trump. They would ready to run his ass out right then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's very few guys, brothers, who have that sort of stability in the profession. That's why we need to support one another. I wanted Kevin Ollie to keep rolling and win another championship.
Right.
I want Shaka to do better at Texas. I want him to do what I know he's capable of doing. Mm-hmm. And until somebody does it at that level, because besides Leonard, who else is doing that? And since that landscape has changed, we need a guy knocking it out, like Tubby did when he was at Kentucky. Mm-hmm. But there's not very many guys performing at that level in the profession. And I was hoping Paul Ewing was going to do it when he went to a national championship, because he's that type of dude. Mm-hmm. That he's thoughtful, he's informed, and he's a brother that cares about the game as it relates to us. But he didn't have quite enough success to really sustain that platform.
Right.
And that's what we need. We need some guys to, it comes back to, you got to win.
Absolutely.
And when you win and you develop that sustainability, then you have a different voice and a different platform. And there's very few brothers out there with that.
Awesome. Nah, I like that. Thank you for clearing that up. And so on that note, I'm gonna end it on that note. But I appreciate all you guys coming through for me today and having this conversation. And I think these conversations can help some people out there that want to get into the profession. I respect all of y'all and y'all work that you guys do, man, and keep doing it, man. And I appreciate y'all again. Thanks for coming out for me.
Thanks, brother.
It's fun to discuss, man. Thanks for having it. Good to see all you, man.